Hi class, my name is Dr. Kennedy Paron, and today we will be discussing Chapter 6, Section 1, Cognitive Development. So Piaget was a prodigy in this area of cognitive development. He is a pioneer in this field. So what exactly is cognitive development? It is the focus on the development of how a child thinks and how they perceive the world around them. Piaget labeled this in perceptions that are schemas or ways we sort how we think into existing categories that we already have in our brains. The use of assimilation was also used to comprehend existing schemas for existing thought processes and categories that we have in our minds. And Piaget thought that cognitive development happened in a few different stages. So we're going to talk a little more on Piaget. So he developed a sequence of these cognitive developments. One is sensory motor, two is pre-operational, three is concrete operational, and four finally is formal operational. We'll get more into this as we discuss. So first we'll be discussing sensory motor. So according to Piaget, this is the first of 2 years of development where the sensory motor stage develops. This is where children can increase development of sensory and motor abilities. So using their senses to see the world around them, hear the world around them, touch, feel, taste, smell the world around them, and how the senses allow them to develop their thoughts on the matter of how they perceive the world around them. Children may not develop their language abilities, but they can still use their sensory abilities to get a grasp on the world around them. So the sensory motor stage. So during this stage, babies are actually able to use their reflexes to respond to differing schemas that they have about the world around them that they already have made in their brains. So these schemas can relate to how behavior is impacted, maybe their response and how they respond to them. And the stages are also known for trial and error. So using information from the past to try and decipher events in the present. So there are 6 substages of the sensory motor stage according to Piaget. We'll discuss these briefly. So first is the simple reflexes. Second is primary circular reactions. Third is secondary circular reactions. Fourth is coordination of secondary schemas. Fifth is tertiary circular reactions. And finally, the 6th is invention of new means through mental combinations. So first we will be discussing the tertiary circular reactions. So this is where infants use trial and error in order to learn about the world around them. This typically happens between ages 12 through 18 months. I have an example. So Piaget did an experiment with his own daughter by putting a stick outside of her playpen and having her grab it. Within a few days, his baby named Jacqueline was able to grab the stick and turning to pull it into the playpen through the slats opening in the playpen. So Piaget would hand it to her long ways or horizontal, and she would spin it so that it was upright and vertical so she could pull it towards herself into the playpen. And Piaget thought that she used her existing knowledge and trial and error in order to find out how to make this work and how to bring the stick into the slats of the playpen to gain access to it. Next, we will be talking about simple reflexes. This typically happens between birth and the first month after birth. This typically happens through assimilation for stimulation or inborn reflexes. So example would be grasping, crying, sucking, turning the head and rooting, or turning towards sound. So next we'll be talking about the primary circular reactions. This typically happens between month 1 and 4 of the baby's life. This is the ability to coordinate sensory motor schemas. So repetition of stimulating actions, for example, a baby repeatedly lifting their arms or legs multiple times in the same way, or turning their face multiple times in the same direction in order to get a visual simulation. Next, we'll be talking about secondary circular reactions. So there is a quote from the book. It says, the repetition of actions that produce an effect on the environment. So this typically happens between months 4 and 8 of the child's life. And the focus is on objects and events in the environment. So an example would be an infant shaking a rattle towards its head to hear the sound. So next we'll be talking about coordination of secondary schemas. So coordination of schemas to activate and achieve a specific goal. So for example, a baby sees their dad place a toy underneath a blanket. So they use their hands to move the blanket and achieve gaining access to the toy through retrieving the toy. So the infant becomes very goal-oriented in this stage, wanting to work towards something in particular and typically gain access to something. So next we'll be talking about the invention of a new means through mental combinations. So this typically happens between 1.5 years and 2 years, 18 months to 24 months of age. This is the movement between sensory motor development and also development of the symbolic thought. So being able to think freely, think for themselves. So where before the phases were highly ran by environmental factors and exploring the environment around them. This phase focuses more on mental capacity and mental exploration and their own thought processes, as opposed to just exploring what is around them and what is present and available to them. So next we're going to talk about object permanence and how it develops. So object permanence is the theory that when something is covered up or taken away, the child at a certain age will think that it is no longer there. It does not exist. Another example would be if a child is hiding during hide and seek, and a baby will often cover their eyes and think that you can no longer see them because they can no longer see you. So object permanence is the recognition that an object continues to exist even if it cannot be seen. So typically younger children struggle with this. As the baby increases in age, they typically get better at this. So this is when something is moved in front of a baby, why they feel it might disappear once it is out of sight, like I discussed. So babies show no draw towards items that are actually not in their immediate line of sight and capacity of space. So once something is gone out of their sight, they no longer take interest in it. So an example was, like I said, when the baby's toy is covered by a piece of cloth, they no longer will see it anymore or even know it exists typically. So when does this change, you might be wondering? Typically, this changes between 8 and 12 months of development. A child will start to look for objects when they are covered by a cloth. This is the age at which a child learns about object permanence. So next, we're going to talk about the strengths and limitations of Piaget's theory of sensory motor development. So Piaget's theory, remember, it remains a large part of the study of infant cognition. He is the forefather of cognition and cognitive development. So most research today agrees that development is not defined by distinct stages. Like Piaget said, it is not linear to each child. They agree that these are very outdated thought processes. So Piaget's thought processes are kind of debunked at this point. So Piaget's credits maturation for sensory motor development, but does not give credit to other factors such as cognitive development that influence cognitive development, such as environmental factors, familial ties, the impact of people around the child, nature versus nurture. So Piaget also underestimates infants as they learn object permanence sooner than he actually thought. Next, we'll be discussing 6.2.